Good morning, church. Welcome to today's devotion. And in today's devotion, we look at Exodus chapter 2, verses 11 onwards. And it said that, and it says, "And it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown that he went out unto his brethren and looked on their burdens." So here we see Moses is at the age of 40, and he's the next in line to probably be the king. And here we see that when Moses has grown up to be a good age of 40, he's looking out for his fellow brethren. And who are his fellow brethren? It is the Hebrews. And even though we see that he's been educated in the palace, that he's still inside is still a Hebrew. He's educated as an Egyptian, but he's still a Hebrew. So verses 11, the second part, to verse 14, it says, "And he spied an Egyptian smiting an Hebrew one of his brethren. Then he looked this way and he looked that way. And when he saw that there was no man, he slew the Egyptian and he hid him in the sand. And when he went out the second day, behold, two men of the Hebrews stove together. And he said to him, What said to him that did the wrong? Wherefore smitest thou fellow? And he said, Who made you a prince and judge over us? Do you intend to kill us also as you killed the Egyptian? And Moses feared and said, Surely this thing is known. So at the prime of his life, Moses wanted to do something for God. So what he does is he sees an Egyptian, persecuting a Hebrew, and he gets rid of the Egyptian. Now here we see that, Moses, he looks to the left and looks to the right, and that is the wrong way of looking at a matter. He should have looked up towards God in his situation, but he looks to the left and looks to the right. He did not look up to see what God wanted from him. Now, sometimes when we minister according to the need and not according to what needs to be obeyed. And this is what Moses fell into. He saw the need and he wanted to do what was needed. So here we see that here a mistake is committed by Moses just because he looked the other way instead of looking up towards God. Now in verses 2 verse 15 it says, "Now when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses, but Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well." So it was a capital offense if one Egyptian killed another Egyptian. So Moses knew that the Pharaoh was definitely going to come for him, and he knew the consequence of the crime that he had committed. So because his crime was known now, he knew that the Pharaoh would deal, with him in a very harsh way. So knowing this and knowing his circumstances, he flees from the scene. Then verses 16 to 20 says that now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. And the shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock. And when they came to Ruel, their father, he said, "How is it that you came so soon this day?" And they said, "An Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds, and also drew water enough for us, and watered the flock." And he said unto his daughters, "And where's he? Why is this that you have left the man? Call him that he may eat." So here we see that a man, Ruel, who is also later on called Jethro, has 7 daughters, and he says that, that the man that you have seen, let's just, grab him and get a hold of him. Probably the act of kindness that Moses showed, Ruel wanted to repay him back. So in verse 2 verse 21, it says, and Moses was content to dwell with a man. Okay, so this is the main focus for today, that Moses, he was content. See, look at this, he's coming from the palace and he's now in the desert. And if you read the book of Acts, we see that Moses was mighty in works and he was also full of the wisdom of Egypt. So that means that he was a very skilled military warrior, and he was also educated in the given a fine education, probably in philosophy, in science, in history, in language, in botany, in astronomy. And here we see that, here he's willing to identify himself as one of the shepherds. We know in Genesis 46 verse 34, when Joseph has to present his family in front of the Pharaoh, Joseph tells his family that, when Pharaoh asks, what is your occupation, say that you are just a shepherd and and you are just cultivator of the ground. And this is why, because Egyptians, they looked down on shepherds and they would gladly allow them to, be shepherds in their land. So here we see that Moses, he's educated in the palace and he's now, identifying himself as being a shepherd. Why? Because Moses was content with where God had put him. I'll reread verse 2 verse 21. Chapter 2 verse 21, it says, Moses was content to dwell with the man. So even in Philippians chapter 4 verse 11, Paul tells us that I've learned to be content in all my situations. Many times as people, we are looking to, better our lives off, get a better house, get a better paying job, get a better car, whatever it is, we want to move up in life and move up in certain areas. But here we see Moses, he was very content with where God has placed him. And here's a very good principle to learn, that, God will not only, take us to the high places, but will also take us to the low places. And we have to learn to trust God in those situations, and we have to be content at that time. Because if you're content today with God, then you'll be content wherever God takes you tomorrow and the day after and the day after. So here we see that Moses was content to dwell with a man. Then in Exodus, the second part of verse 21 and verse 22, it says, and he gave Moses, as in Ruel gave Moses Zipporah his daughter, and she bore him a son, and he called his name Gershom, for he said, I have been a stranger in a foreign land. So here we see that Moses marries one of Jethro's daughters, and her name is Zipporah, and they have a son by the name of Gershom. Now Moses names his son Gershom, and that means stranger. So Moses knew that, he was just a stranger in that land. This was not his permanent house. Probably he already knew that, heaven was going to be his final destination. Now in those times, the Savior had not yet come, but what they would do is they would look towards the coming of the Savior and they would be saved. So Moses and his household, they were looking towards the Savior, and they knew that, this land was not their permanent. And when you know that, this, whatever you own, and this house, this land and this earth doesn't belong to us but the Lord, you learn to be content in everything, knowing that we are going to a better place someday, and that place, every day as we live our lives closer, we come closer and closer to going to our heavenly abode. Then in Exodus, the last two verses 23 to 25, last three verses, we see that, the people, the Hebrews, you know, begin to, cry out to the Lord because they are in bondage. And because they are crying out to the Lord in the situation, we see that, things start to, get better, and the Lord begins to interact on their behalf. And we'll continue this narrative next time in chapter 3. So this is a devotional for today. Have a nice day, guys. I'll see you soon. Have a nice day.